Well, speaking of burning in hell, how about we go out there now and let's talk about the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And not just the legend of Sleepy Hollow, but one of the main characters in that legend, which was what? The Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman. You remember that? He would chase Ichabod Crane across that bridge, and he had the burning jack-o'-lantern that he would throw at him. Of course, the legend of Sleepy Hollow was a book that was written by Washington Irving, and it was published in 1820, and it actually referred to a legend that apparently did exist there in Sleepy Hollow. Now, Sleepy Hollow is a town in New York in the Hudson Valley, and it's about 10 miles from White Plains, New York. Now, in October 1776, the Continental Army under George Washington was actually encamped in White Plains, New York. They had suffered some major defeats, particularly in August of that year, and they'd lost control of the city of New York, which was one of our major cities, to the British. So by October, the Army had mostly fallen back to the area of White Plains, New York, and the British and their mercenaries, their German mercenaries that they brought over with them, which were the Hessians. The Hessians were German mercenaries who were paid by the British to come over and essentially help fight the war. Now, remember, the British wore red coats, but the Hessians wore blue coats, and they were considered to be fearsome and merciless warriors. They were sort of feared by the Continental Army as being much more fearsome than just the redcoats. So they pursued the Continental Army to White Plains, New York, and on October 28th of 1776, there was the Battle of White Plains, New York, and many people say that this is where the Headless Horseman was formed. But actually, there was a follow-on skirmish after the battle that took place on November 1st, 1776, and Major General William Heath of the American Army reported that during that battle, a cannon was fired at one of the German artillery positions, the Hessian artillery positions, and it actually took the head clean off of a Hessian artilleryman, and that was actually reported. And so that was probably the genesis of the idea of the Headless Horseman. Now, whether he actually came back and haunted the area or not is open to debate. But of course, remember, White Plains is only about 10 miles from Sleepy Hollow. So where the skirmish occurred would have been very close to Sleepy Hollow, New York. Now, of course, shortly thereafter, a couple of months later, we had a pivotal battle called the Battle of Trenton in New Jersey, and that was December 26, 1776, and many people consider that to be the turning point of the Revolutionary War, and it's where the Continental Army, led by George Washington, actually snuck into the town and surprised and captured the entire brigade of Hessians who were in the middle of their Christmas celebration and hadn't quite slept it all off yet. And the Continental Army swooped in and captured them, and that's widely considered to be the turning point of the Revolutionary War. So all of this is happening right up in that area and right in line with the story and the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now, lest you think that the only place where we've got headless horse people is here in the U.S., in a small town in Hudson Valley, New York, you would be wrong, because the Irish also have a legend of a headless horseman. Now, in Irish folklore, it's called a Dullahan, and that is the dark man. And it's a headless fairy creature, and he sometimes carries his head under his arm as well. Now, sometimes he's riding a horse, and sometimes he's driving a horse-drawn carriage. But when he shows up, it always portends death. And if you remember, we talked a little bit about Darby O'Gill and the Little People last week. Well, at the end of that show, guess who shows up? Remember, you had the Banshee, and the Banshee was howling at him, and he goes, and Darby O'Gill goes outside, and then what's coming? The Death Coach. And the Death Coach rides up, and the entity, the creature that is in charge or piloting that coach is headless. So it's another headless horseman. So now I've just taken the headless horseman myth from Sleepy Hollow, New York, and I've tied it back in with our Irish folklore and the Banshee and Darby O'Gill and the Little People. And I'll tell you what, if you want to be something great for Halloween, the Headless Horseman is always a good choice because it's pretty easy to do, right? You just put your shirt over your head. That's all you got to do, and button it up, or your jacket, and you're set. You're ready to go. You're the Headless Horseman. Thanks for sticking with us, folks. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.